Eric Morris, while he clearly liked OSU and sees the potential there, he had a long list of suitors himself. I think Arkansas was very high on him. And I think what you're seeing now with all the players all the funding they've had to bring in Drew Mestemaker, the quarterback, Caleb Hawkins, on down, all the players they brought in from North Texas. Eric Morris, I'm sure, and his salary's not as high as I was expecting because I think he wants more money towards revenue sharing. But I think one of the number one conversations he probably had with Chad Weiberg is, do you have the funding in place for me to go get my guys? I know the guys on my North Texas team that can play in the NFL and that can make me win immediately. Do you have the money and the donor support to go make that happen? And from everything we've seen, Chad Weiberg not only promised that, but he delivered that to Eric Morris because they've landed everyone they possibly could have wanted from North Texas.
Yeah, we're up to, is it 14? What's the latest number on North Texas transfers?
Well, it changes by the hour, but last I checked, it was 15. But I would expect that number to keep climbing. But they've gotten a lot of transfers from other Power 4 schools, namely Texas Tech, which is interesting because I think that's really shaping up to be kind of the rivalry in the Big 12. Two very similar schools, very similar histories. So that is interesting. But no, I mean, I think Eric Morris has been given every tool to be successful, and I just think there's this misconception again about Oklahoma State in the NIL era. I would refer people back all the way back to when Mike Gundy was hired, and Boone Pickens donated all that money for the new stadium, but it went well past just the stadium and facilities. They hired Larry Fedora to be their offensive coordinator, and he was making, I believe, top 10 to top 15 money as an offensive coordinator from day one. Mike Gundy's first day on the job, they have paid their assistant coaches top 10 to 15 money the entirety of Mike Gundy's tenure. So they've clearly had the funding to win big at football. And that's partially why they have. They've replaced a lot of coaches too. So this is not just we fired Mike Gundy, so we got to get serious about NIL thing. No, this is more of this program got very stale under Mike. Mike did not want to play the NIL game. Mike did not want to recruit as hard as he used to. He had top 25 classes his first 2, 3, 4 years, but that had fallen into the 50s and 60s. Oklahoma State, I don't want to call them a sleeping giant, but they are a sleeping top 20 to top 15 program. That's what they are. That's what they've been when Mike Gundy was at his peak. So I do think that the infrastructure they have in place now combined with Eric Morris, I think they can hit the ground running as soon as next year.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I feel like that's one of those things we all have such short memories these days, and we're in such a totally different era. But yeah, when the Boone Pickens stuff happened, like I'm going to say punchline. It's not like a punchline like making fun of Oklahoma State, but that was like a thing that people talked about a lot, referenced like, oh yeah, Oklahoma State's, they got the money, right? They've got all that Boone Pickens money. And like people around the conference, I think were jealous of that there for a while. And then it's like, you just slide away from that. Obviously Boone Pickens not around to give the money anymore. And so we all kind of forget about it, but I think you make solid points about where this program has been and where it could go.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting with the new Big 12 too. You don't have OU and Texas sitting there in the conference. You don't have A&M. It's a different league that's even more ripe for the picking. And before OU left, Oklahoma State had the second most wins in the Big 12 over the previous 15, 20 years. They were the second winningest program in the Big 12 with Texas there. Right? They were beating up on Texas. And so Oklahoma State too, I don't think people realize they have the most suites in the country. Michigan would be second. Like that is a lot of money funneling into a football program. And then you look at this year, by far the worst team in the country among the Power Fours, dating back to a year when they went 3-9 the year prior. Despite all of that, they averaged nearly 40,000 in attendance every single home game. That just shows you the level of support that is at Oklahoma State and the level in which they want to win. And so that's just another reason why it's going to be really exciting to see what this is going to look like under Eric Morris, because this thing has been percolating for a while. And I think now that they have the coach in place and now the talent as well, it's going to be fascinating to see if they can really challenge Texas Tech, because I've also heard that, through my sources that, Oklahoma State is right there with Tech in terms of NIL money. Now, certainly they don't have a Cody Campbell, but they have I mean, there was one donor, Bill Haston of the Tulsa World reported it. There was one donor out of Oklahoma City that funded the entirety of the Drew Mestemaker contract. That's just one guy. So there's a lot of deep pockets that wear orange, and they want to see Oklahoma State return to what they were, and that's one a nationally relevant program.
Yeah, no, and I've seen two different reports. One was like 7 million, one was just north like 7.5 million for Mestemaker over 2 years. But yeah, it's definitely paying, pretty top tier quarterback money there. Were there, like with Mestemaker, Caleb Hawkins, obviously running back, was another top 5, depending on where you're looking, but pretty consensus top 5 guy at his position. Wyatt Young at receiver, same kind of deal. Did you get a vibe or a feel for like what kind of competition there was? Was it just always Oklahoma State slam dunk, or like how hard did they have to fight to get those guys in?
They still had to fight. I mean, if you remember Eric Morris, when he was at North Texas, Chandler Morris, no relation, the quarterback that is now at Virginia, walked into Eric Morris's office, as the story goes, and says, "I got $1 million offer from Virginia." And Eric Morris said, "You got to take it. Like, good luck. I'll be okay, but you can't turn that down." And so, like, Morris knows that guys, his quarterbacks are wanted, and that it's going to take a lot of money. I was told that Oregon really pushed for Mestemaker, that upped the salary for Drew Mestemaker, and then Oklahoma State basically assured Eric Morris that we're not losing any bidding wars from anyone you want from your team. Like, we promised you that. We're going to make that happen, and that's exactly what happened. They had to kind of up the stakes with Mestemaker for sure. I think that's why you see now he's only making a few $100,000 less than his head coach at Oklahoma State, which is just kind of shows you how crazy things have gotten in college football. But I think the same could be said for Hawkins and Young. I mean, those are two guys that are on the map. I mean, you just look at their numbers. I mean, both in the top 10 in the country at their respective positions, production-wise. So they probably had to up their range for that. But specifically on Mestemaker, they had to fend off Oregon, and I think Indiana was pretty high on him as well. So I think that just says a lot. It says, yeah, like, I'd love to come play for Eric Morris, and I know there's a lot of traps that can befall quarterbacks that go other places for money, and they go play for a different coach, different system. And we haven't seen that work out a whole lot. So I'm sure that was in the back of Mestemaker's mind. But ultimately, this is a dollars and cents game, and clearly Oklahoma State delivered that on that end.
Well, the other thing I would say, too, if anybody has any doubt about Mestemaker, I mean, if Oregon and Indiana are the places that are wanting you right now, look at the run of quarterbacks that they've been on. That's a pretty good indicator that Mestemaker's got it. Who else out of this group are there others that people should be paying attention to, whether it's North Texas guys or not, just in this transfer portal haul for Oklahoma State?
Yeah, I think Miles Coleman, the other receiver out of North Texas, a lot of people that cover North Texas think he might be like the biggest get at receiver, even alongside Wyatt Young, Wyatt Young. I watched that Rice game when he had 295, and I was like, okay, OSU, go get that guy. But Miles Coleman too. I mean, I just think that triumvirate there with Hawkins, Young, and Coleman to surround Mestemaker is big time. They're also just getting pieces here and there that I think will serve them really well. They just got an offensive lineman today out of Coastal Carolina who's had just a million starts, has a ton of experience. And I think that's where we're going to find out. I mean, under Mike Gundy, they got some guys who had 4 stars next to their name coming out of high school that didn't produce at Oklahoma State. Is Eric Morris as good of an evaluator in the portal as he is finding these guys out of high school? That remains to be seen, and that will ultimately prove whether he can kind of replicate the Curt Cignetti model that he's done at Indiana, where he came from James Madison, brought all of his players, immediately won 11 games. Now you see this year he's in the college football semifinal. That's kind of the model that everyone at Oklahoma State is hoping that Eric Morris can replicate.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're seeing that, Penn State with Iowa State too. I mean, you're going to have a couple case studies to watch this year for that. And having said all that, I mean, I feel like this is sort of an impossible question to answer in some ways because of it, because we just have not been in this era long enough to really know. But like, what are realistic expectations overall for Oklahoma State based on this plugging and playing? Because to me, I look at it and I'm like, you are taking so much of that team. They're going to be working with basically the same coaching staff, right? Playing for the guy that they played for last year, and Eric Morris. It seems like, I mean, if there's going to be a chance to hit the ground running, it's definitely what Oklahoma State has put together here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying not to get too over my skis on what they can do next year because I do understand there is a sentiment of OSU fans that are like, okay, just because we get North Texas's roster does not mean that we're going to win the Big 12 next year. And I certainly understand that. Like, North Texas did get dump trucked by Tulane. Okay, so I understand they need more pieces besides just the headliners that they got from North Texas, and so that remains to be seen. Can they fill in the defensive side of the football? They did get North Texas's top leading tackler as well. Can they fill in the defensive side of the football? Because that's going to be the number one question: is can they have some level of success defensively to keep them in games? And I think that's another thing that's underrated about Eric Morris, how shrewd he was going and hiring Skylar Cassidy from Sam Houston, bringing virtually almost all of Sam Houston's defensive staff over. And immediately in year one at North Texas, that defensive staff completely turned around their defense in year one. So Morris clearly has a keen eye for not just the offensive side of the football, but what he wants to see on the defensive side as well. And he brought his entire defensive staff with him to Stillwater at Oklahoma State. So everyone talks about Mestemaker and how he found this guy out of nowhere, and that is certainly true. But I think a really underrated element about him was how he poached the Sam Houston State defensive staff and the way they were able to flip their defense last year. Because if that defensive improvement that we saw at North Texas can continue at Oklahoma State, I mean, we've already seen it, John. I mean, Arizona State came in here. Now they had Cam freaking Scattaboo. I understand. But they came in here and won the Big 12 out of nowhere. In this era, I think Oklahoma State could challenge the Big 12 next year. I really do.